This is the affidavit filed by my great-great-grandmother, Mary Ann Harshaw, in 1885 when she was 75 years old. She was filing for the pension that would go to her from her deceased son, David Harshaw, who had been a soldier in Company G, 15th Regiment, the United States Colored Soldiers. He died in 1864 in Nashville, Tennessee, and is buried there in the National Cemetery along with other Harshaws that served also in the same regiment and company. I was very fortunate to find this affidavit that was filed from Ellijay, Georgia, Gilmer County, where my grandfather, in fact, was born. If you have any relatives that you know of that served in the Civil War, I would encourage you to try and find the pension form that would give you a lot of information about the family, whether it is filed by the person leaving the military, his wife, or his child. In this affidavit, my great-great-grandmother Mary Ann declares that David Harshaw, or Harshaw, in Shelbyville, Tennessee, was in fact her son, and that he was born to her and her husband, Harry Harshaw. It also gives the other siblings, George H. Harshaw, my great-grandfather, and his twin brother, Clem Harshaw, who were born on March 10th, 1855. He also had a sister, Harriet, who was born March 15th in 1853. She died at the age of 13, and Clem died at the age of 14, leaving only my great-grandfather, George H. Harshaw, to carry on the legacy of the family. If you look in the lower left-hand corner of the document, you will see the actual signature of my great-grandfather, George H. I was very, very fortunate to receive this document. It also states that she and her husband, Harry, were married in 1856 by Richard Harshaw Colored. I wish it had stated the relationship of Richard Harshaw to the family, so I would have that connection. Harry Harshaw subsequently died in April of 1856 and is buried in the cemetery down in North Carolina. My great-grandfather, George H., moved on to Ellijay, Georgia, where he met and married Georgiana Withrow, the daughter of Dempsey Withrow, who had moved from Rutherford County, North Carolina, to Ellijay, Georgia. In my research, I found a number of African American Withrows living in Rutherford County, North Carolina, but had no way to connect them. Dempsey was born in 1815 in North Carolina, and he could have been, in fact, the father of several of the male Withrows listed in Rutherford County, North Carolina, but I had no way of connecting those families. You see here from a page in a book written by Mr. Ward, who was a historian in LJ, of an incident in early 1875 from the postmaster, Mr. Guerin, in LJ. And because the store was not like Walmart and very busy, he had infrequent visitors. But on this day, he lists that George Harshaw, a Negro school teacher, came into his store. My great-grandfather went on to teach both in LJ at the African American School, but also in Talona, Georgia, at the Cherokee Indian School there. Talona had become a magnet when gold was discovered there, and my great-grandfather took off with my great-grandmother to try and do his own prospecting for gold, which he had no luck. Ironically, or subsequently, because he was a twin, he had 3 sets of twins. And that legacy continues on today in several members of our family. I went to Murphy, North Carolina, to the Harshaw plantation, which is still there and on the historic register. And while I was there, I agreed to do a newspaper article on black Harshaws in Cherokee County and how they rose from slavery. That article was published not only in Cherokee County, but also in Copper Hill, North Carolina, not far away. A gentleman named Robert Barkley, who was white, read the article, contacted the newspaper, got my phone number, and contacted me when I was living then in Chattanooga, Tennessee. He informed me that there was a Harshaw buried in his family cemetery in LJ, Georgia. I was amazed one day he called me, because our history of Copper Hill, when I was a young man leaving on the train from Cincinnati, Ohio, heading to Murphy, on to LJ, to Atlanta and home, when the train got to Copper Hill and the conductor yelled Copper Hill, all the blacks had to get on the floor, because whites would either shoot through the window at them or try and pull them off the train. My father saved my Uncle Walter Mill's life by keeping them from pulling him off the train. So naturally, my mother was skeptical that I should go to Copper Hill to see Mr. Barkley. So he and I met in LJ, and he took me to his family, the Fells, F-E-L-L-S, the Fells Cemetery, and showed me the tombstone, which was in fact my great-grandfather, George H. Harshaw. I was curious as to why he was buried in a white family cemetery, and we surmised that because of when he died, that the winter may have been harsh and that cemetery was probably the closest in proximity for burial. So needless to say, I was ecstatic at this discovery to find his grave there. Mary and Harshaw fought from 1875 to 1890 for the pension, which she subsequently received in 1890, pension of $100, which she used to buy a very small piece of land. Prior to that, in other affidavits that she had to collect to submit from friends who knew her, the friends wrote that I have seen her walking with broken veins, trying to survive, taking in washing, making soap. Needless to say, that broke my heart. Understanding what she was going through after slavery. Subsequently, my great-grandfather and his family stayed there in LJ until his death. My great-great-grandmother, Georgiana, stayed there until she moved away to Cincinnati, where she passed, and she is in fact also buried in LJ, Georgia. Also in her affidavit, she states that David had been a slave on the land of Jesse Raper, who was in fact a Native American. And he had also been a slave on the land of the Dickey family. He had a small plot of land that he grew, small amounts of crops that he was allowed to take to the market and sell and raise a little money. She also states that she was on the plantation of Joshua Harshaw in Murphy, North Carolina, along with my maternal great-great-grandmother, Indiana Harshaw. I was curious because she was late in her years when she had her children. In fact, about 35 or 33 years old. And I wondered if she had had other children before that. I found her living in McMinn County, Tennessee, where my mother's family, the Armstrongs, were born, with a Smith family. The gentleman there, Mr. Smith, was not her son. The young lady there must have been her daughter, who had been born prior to her other children at an earlier time, because the census did not list her as a servant, and at that time that census did not list whether or not she was the mother-in-law of the head of the house. She passed in 1891 in LJ, Georgia, and is buried there. She was a strong-willed woman who kept the family afloat during some very difficult times, experiencing the horrible ordeal of slavery, and moving on with her son, George H., to LJ, where she passed.